Hey, this is Ing Venning for Conscious Mosaic. So today I'm thinking about the unique place in history where we are for creatives. So I'm an indie author, but you could be like a visual artist, musician, game developer, filmmaker, whatever it is. It's easier now than ever to publish your work. We have print on demand technology. We have websites like DeviantArt and YouTube. Like it's just easy to get your work out there. And that's great. That's really a blessing. But there are cons as well as pros. So, for instance, for me, I don't have to deal with a literary agent, which is great. I don't have to work with somebody who might want me to compromise my creative vision to maximize profit or just because they don't understand my work or something. But that means that I'm responsible for formatting, editing, publishing, marketing, trying to find my audience, and those things, that's good too, but that's a lot of hard work. I feel like a lot of people out there are capable of producing good work, but because it's so easy to publish, maybe they don't give it their full effort. So right now the market is just being deluged with a lot of mediocre work, and it's hard to be seen in that crowd. And so there are a lot of people out there that are mentors. I specifically am more familiar with author mentors, and I mean there are some fantastic ones out there. Nick Stevenson, Joanna Penn, Derek Murphy, Chris Fox, Mark Dawson, Kristen Kiefer. I'm sure I'm forgetting some names, but they're just wonderful author mentors out there that can help you out. I agree with almost all of their advice, but some of their advice I disagree with, especially because I think that they are more telling people how to create entertainment literature rather than, truly literary work. And which that's not that they're doing anything wrong even, it's just that their goals might be a little bit different than some authors' goals, than my goals as an author. And so I wrote a short essay that came out of those thoughts and feelings, and I thought I'd share it with you. You can also find it if you want to read it in my free sampler, Eclecticon Volume 9, 13 and a third, but I wanted to read it as well. It's called My Hands Aren't Dumb. Hello, reader. I've been told to assume that you're an idiot. More than that you're callow, shallow, and superficial, that you lack imagination and curiosity. Oh, I haven't been told in so many words. This description of you is intrinsic to the advice I often hear offered to writers. I remember when my junior high English teacher introduced the class to the works of Edgar Allan Poe. I'd already read some of his stories, as had a few of my classmates who already knew they loved reading. But I still remember the junior high introduction to his work because of the severely different attitudes it elicited. Even if they hadn't already discovered a love of literature in general, some of my fellow students fell in love with Poe. Yes, the vocabulary was challenging, necessitating their opening dictionaries and thumbing to the glossaries at the back of the reader to figure out just exactly what was being said. Yes, the stories were, if simple on the surface, full of complex inquiries into the nature of humanity. But some of my peers worked past these difficulties and grew to love Poe's depth and darkness. But most of the class struggled. Most of the other students greeted the opening bell of those English classes with groans and sighs. They opened their books, and for the 50 minutes when Poe was mandatory, did their best to resist his prose. They launched spitballs, they whispered about football, they worked to find clever ways to distract the teacher from Poe's narratives and their education about them. Most eventually gave in and read along, apparently of the opinion that they had to grin and bear it. A few diehards just refused to read and took a hit to their grades. Whether or not they like Poe or remember being introduced to him in school, readers still fall into similar categories. Some people simply choose not to read. This is good, in some ways anyway. Those people aren't going to buy my books. After all, we're not in school anymore, and I'm not the assigned author, so I don't have to try to persuade them to understand, like my often weary and discouraged instructors of yesteryear. But what about those who do elect to read? Do I have to assume that my best strategy is to treat them like the resistant readers and cater to their stupidity or laziness? Haven't they chosen to read after all? Yes, but are they only seeking selfish benefit or distraction? Or are they the ones who really care? The advice given to many writers suggests the former, but is it true? I'm supposed to assume that my readers have a limited grasp of the language. I'm advised to keep my vocabulary simple so as not to confuse them. I'm incessantly reminded to avoid the sin of employing purple prose, both for good reasons, such as that it can distract from my writing, and bad ones, such as my readers being such dolts that they cannot be bothered to learn the occasional new word. Moreover, I'm often instructed, though not in exactly these words, to assume my readers have poor imaginations in terms of the non material, that they can readily comprehend objects and physicality, but that they cannot grasp experiences and intangible concepts. I'm supposed to emphasize nouns and adjectives over verbs and especially prepare yourself for the horror adverbs whenever possible. I must only very cautiously dare to explain something to my readers that might be rooted in the non physical because their poor imaginations might just crack beneath the strain of the unknown. The most common advice that manifests this notion is that I'm supposed to avoid all dialogue tags other than said. All verbs tied to utterances are to be reduced to this one short, insipid tag. Readers are alleged to become too distracted to continue if I burden their frail minds with such terms as explain, insist, or how dare I asseverate. If readers have to turn away for even a moment for a one time reference to a dictionary for a particular term, they might not have the wherewithal or willpower to ever take up my narrative again. Yes, readers are said to be that easily perturbed and discouraged. And if readers are dense when it comes to writing, they are expected to be equally so when it comes to storytelling elements. In the first place, readers can't handle stories that are too long, whether this proposed length is of chapter or volume. Apparently, readers simply cannot hold fast to a narrative in the face of overwhelming stimuli, like, say, small noises or minute changes in temperature or lighting. After a couple of hundred words, the average reader apparently disengages, exclaiming, I'm sitting in a chair, or the sun is overhead. Ironically, however, readers apparently buy multiple volumes of series length stories, especially if they contain a large cast of characters, leading one to wonder if they ever craft the subsequent volumes or simply acquire them for decoration. Perhaps they need personal libraries in order to have something to stare at when the other books they're reading become too long or too verbose, needing the distraction of, hey, there's another book over there. And yet, many readers do seem to read second, third, or later volumes. Perhaps they can only make it through if the chapters are short enough, like a child who can only eat its pasta after an adult has carefully cut it into small bits. I'm often told that I must start a story with a bang or a hook in order to engage readers, and I agree to an extent. But for me, a great hook can take the form of an intriguing bit of philosophy or a compellingly strange metaphor. Indeed, when the opening paragraph of a novel begins with a fist fight or a death or an orgasm, especially when they serve no purpose, I often find myself thinking, let's move past this trite crap and get to the real story. But what I perhaps loathe most is the advice that a story must be predictable. I guess it begins with the cover design. I'm told I must vehemently avoid any image that makes readers wonder or scratch their heads in, uh-oh, curiosity. The cover must immediately and decisively announce to the reader what the volume contains, even in many instances in terms of its climax, or the lack of surety will cause them to flee in alarm. This notion continues into the narrative, of course. Readers apparently pick a single genre and its books again and again. They stay within their given niches, causing all sorts of trouble for those rogue authors who dare to diverge from established tropes or who forge into the weird, speculative, or, gasp, eclectic narrative. I must never commit the mortal sin of confusing my readers or piquing their interest too much. Boringly exciting and predictably strange are the formulae I must adhere to for the monomaniacal genre in which I choose to write my only works, even if that genre is fantasy or science fiction. Obviously, I'm not a good little writer who adheres to the established norms, nor do I want my readers to want me to be. When I read Poe in junior high school, I wanted to be titillated, thrilled, and pleasantly baffled. And I feel that way about any narrative I read or write. I want to engage with readers who also loved Poe's or any other writer's stories in spite of dense language, queer events, or the fear of being unpopular with their bored classmates. I write things that interest me. And quite frankly, I'm a freak who writes for other outsiders. I'm gifted, pagan, pansexual, socialist, mad, and I'm looking for readers who are too. Yes, I'm that writer, that dumbass who writes perspicaciously, who tells crazy stories, who would begin his book with 3 essays about writing and readership. Yes, I'm that stupid, or that insane. It's dangerous, I know, to engage in such terrible marketing practices, to sell my writing short by not selling it short. Perhaps there aren't many people like me out there. But whether you identify in the ways I do or would make the choices I would make, aren't we all outsiders at some point in our lives? Aren't there readers out there who will empathize with me? Won't you let me titillate you? Thank you for listening. Please feel free to like and comment, share and subscribe. I'll see you on the next post. Have a fantastic day.